everybody, welcome to Fort Ross State Historic Park. Thanks for joining me. We're going to be processing acorns today to make food. And acorns traditionally were a staple food for native people all over the world, including the native Kashaya that lived here before this was Fort Ross, when it was called Matini. And the oak trees that we have here are tan oak trees, but there are different types depending where you are. Even in California, there are many different types of oak trees. So if you're going to be harvesting your own acorns, you might not be using tan oak acorns specifically. I wanted to show you here, this is called a burden basket, and this was made by one of our Kashaya friends. And women would use a basket like this when they were going into the trees, into the oak trees, and they were harvesting things like the acorns or perhaps berries. And I could put this just like that. It's pretty clever, and then my hands would be free, and I could be gathering things from the trees and bushes or gathering on the floor and putting things in my burden basket. After you harvest your acorns, you want to check them all to make sure they're good. You're going to find a lot that aren't good for eating. So when the acorns are shed from the tree, first of all, the ones that have caps on them, those have been shed early because there's something wrong with them. So if you see an acorn with a cap still on, you're going to just leave that for the animals. If you see ones that have discolorations, black marks, those aren't good either, so you're going to want to get rid of those. And if you see acorns with little holes, that means there's a little animal that's beaten you to that acorn and they've already burrowed their way out. So you don't want to bother with those either. And we have a nice bowl of acorns here that are ready to go. They've already been sorted. So we're going to just start cracking them. And I've got my mallet here. You can also use a rock. And I'm going to put the point down on my cutting board and just give it a nice crack. You can see it's cracked open pretty easily, and that's because these have been drying for quite a while. So they crack open really nice when they've been drying and stored. And I'm going to crack that open. You can see all this meat inside, this wonderful meat. And acorns are nice because there's so much meat in each one, a lot more than you get from some other nuts. Now that I've cracked my acorn, I'm going to put it in my mortar and pestle here, and that's going to be ready for when I'm grinding up my acorns. Now I wanted to show you a really special pestle. This one was found here at Fort Ross, and it's got a number on it because it's part of a museum catalog, and it's thought to be a couple hundred years old or so. And so you can imagine, a couple hundred years ago, there was a Kashaya woman that was using this very pestle to grind up acorns, just like we're doing today, to make food for her family. So I'm going to grind up the acorns, and depending on what you want to make with them, you can leave it as a nice coarse meal if you wanted to make like a porridge. But I want to make a flour to make something like acorn pancakes. So I'm going to try to grind this up really nice and fine. So it takes a little bit more work and time. So I've been grinding this up for quite a while, and you can see it's starting to look more like flour. There's still some big chunks in there, but it's still pretty coarse, right? More like a meal. So I'm going to keep going until I get to my flour state. I'm grinding away, and as I'm grinding, I can smell the acorn meal. It smells just a little bit sweet. It's quite nice. So you can see here, these are the cracked acorns that we started with, and we've been grinding and grinding for quite a while, and now we have this nice flour mixture. And the next thing we have to do is sift this so that the fine particles are what we're going to have to work with. I have a nice metal bowl here which I'm going to use to sift the acorn flour into, and I've got this metal sifter. I'm going to put it right on top. And then I'm going to take my mortar and I'm going to dump all of my ground acorn flour right through here. Okay, so I'm going to be sifting, and you'll see the finer grains are going through and the coarser grains are left in my sifter here. So we want a nice fine grain for our flour. So we've got here the fine acorn grains sifted here, and you can see in here we've got some pretty big chunks left behind in the sifter. The next thing we have to do is leach the tannins out of our acorn flour. It's going to be quite bitter if you were to eat it straight, so it's really important that you leach it, and that means using water to pull the tannins out of the flour. I'm going to use a cold water bath, so I've just got some cold water here in my bowl, and I'm going to go ahead and pour it in right over my acorn flour. So I want to fill this up with as much water as I can, because the more volume of water I have in here, the more the water is able to pull the tannins out. So if I had just a little bit of water, there wouldn't be a lot of room within the water to grab those tannins. So more is better in this case. And I can let this sit for about 15 minutes, and then I'm going to want to pour the water off and put in new water. And the more I change the water out, the quicker the tannins will be pulled out. If I were to just let this sit for a couple hours, it would really slow down the process. I'm dumping off the cold water here, then I'm going to replenish it with fresh water to keep the leaching process going. The water has got a yellowy orange color. It's not clear and fresh anymore. So I'm dumping off some more cold water that's been soaking for a while. And again, this is a process we're going to want to do over and over until it's done. And the acorn flour should taste really bland when it's ready. You shouldn't get a bitter or astringent flavor, and that's how you know it's done. So I'm going to pour off my leached acorn flour, and we've only made just a very small amount here today, just as a demonstration. But you could use a lot of acorns and make a nice big amount depending on what you want to use it for. I'm gonna just put it in there like that through a cloth so some water can strain out. And this could be stored in the refrigerator for a couple of weeks if I didn't want to use it right away. Or if I wanted to just make my flour now, I could put this on a nice sheet and put it out in the sun, bring it in during the day and let it dry out so it's a nice flour. And I could use this to make bread, to make pancakes, really whatever I want, just like I would use any other flour.